Hi, this is Adam Blaylock, and you're listening to Adam the Movie Guy. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy the show. Warning, the show you're about to listen to contains strong language and an unhinged host. Don't take me too serious, I'm doing a bit here, so stay the fuck off my back. Enjoy. If this shocks you, if this offends you, and you clicked on the wrong fucking podcast. Welcome back, everyone, to another Friday the 13th Flash episode. This is your unhinged host, Adam the Movie Guy, and today's mini episode is Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. Since the whole imposter thing didn't work out in the last movie, go fucking figure, they literally dug Jason out of his grave for his big comeback. This is pretty much the starting point where the movies start to pivot focus a bit on to Jason as being equal to or more than the rest of the cast being the focus of these movies. You know, I recall my favorite podcaster, Alex Edwards from the Skeleton Crew, and now Dead Man's Party, my favorite fucking podcast of all time, being the Skeleton Crew. You guys gotta check it out. He mentioned this in their crew's retrospective of Friday Part 6, or was it Part 7? Fuck me, it was one of those. But anyway, he mentions this in one of those retrospectives, and now, having said that, when I first saw this movie years ago at the age of 12, I thought it was the best Friday movie ever. Now that I'm older and somewhat smarter, sort of, my opinion of the movie took some noticeable dips. While overall, I still think it's solid, I have some problems with the movie that I'll get into at the end of the show. But first thing is first, let's get into the synopsis, some plot beats, and a bit into the characters. Alright, years after Part 4, because this movie pretty much pretends Part 5 doesn't exist, Tommy Jarvis, played by another new-faced Thom Mathews from Return of the Living Dead fame, is out of the mental hospital and brings his buddy Hawes on a trip to Camp Crystal Lake Cemetery, now renamed Forest Green, to cremate Jason's corpse. They dig the old bag of bones out of his grave where his body gets struck by lightning just like the Frankenstein monster. Boom, Jason is back to the land of the living. Thanks a lot, Tommy. We really appreciate you for that one. With Jason now back from the dead, he kills everyone who comes into his path, and it's up to Tommy and Megan, the daughter of the sheriff who wants to castrate Tommy, to put him down again. I mean, that's the most basic gist of the story for this movie. I'm trying to muster more enthusiasm for this one, but fuck me, I just want to get to New York already. Although I should count my blessings since the next one, holy shit, is kind of a slog to go through. But I'll get to that when I get there. Since Tommy, being the genius he is, brings Jason back to life, he ends up going to Sheriff Garris, who thinks Tommy's a fucking wacko, which to be fair, he is. And after a bit of a kerfluffle, he ends up locking Tommy's ass up and later escorting him out of the town limit to get rid of his crazy ass. Meanwhile, during this time, Jason just starts cutting a path through everyone on his way back home, whether it be some random people in the woods playing paintball. That's a stupid fucking scene. Drunk graveyard digger, two of the head counselors of the newly reopened Camp Forest Green, and so on and so forth. This unfortunately ends up fucking Tommy over since Sheriff Garris and his head deputy think he's responsible for the murders. Here's a little clip that emphasizes that.
My boy sure wants us to believe his story.
Well, he picked the right day to pull this shit.
What do you mean?
Happy Friday the 13th.
So the sheriff's daughter, Megan, and her friends, meanwhile, are running the camp, taking care of the kids, and Megan runs into Tommy, and she believes his story about Jason's return, and she ends up teaming up with him to take down Jason for some strange reason. I don't know, I think she's just horny after Tommy. I don't even think she truly believes him at first. I think she just wants to fuck him, but whatever. And after some of the usual Friday the 13th chaos, this all culminates in a final confrontation with Tommy and Jason on the lake of the camp, where Tommy, with the help of Megan, tie a chain around Jason's neck attached to a boulder, and they throw his ass down to the bottom of the lake, stopping him for good. Except no, because there's multiple sequels after this. Now, this movie has some noticeable self-aware humor to it, a perfect example being the scene where Jason kills the head camp counselors in the car, and we get this gem of a line. Take a listen to it real quick.
Darren, we better turn around.
Why?
Because I've seen enough horror movies to know any weirdo wearing a mask is never friendly.
And another example was when the drunk gravedigger is filling the plot of Jason's grave that Tommy and Haas, his buddy, dug out in the opening of the movie. He's just talking shit, and he directly says these lines while looking straight into the camera, breaking the fourth wall, or at the very least, very leaning heavily on it. Take a listen real quick.
Well, I ain't gonna touch this slimy sucker. Why'd I have to go and dig up Jason? Some folks have a strange idea entertaining.
Now, there's multiple instances of humor like this throughout the movie, and honestly, I'm hot and cold about it when it comes to my personal feelings. More on the cold side these days, to be honest. We do get a genuinely sweet moment when one of the little campers, who goes by the name Nancy, is having a nightmare, and two of the female counselors comfort her. Take a listen to it.
We're here. Yeah, honey, we're here. So what happened?
There's this monster, and he was after me, and he wanted to kill me.
Where?
He was everywhere.
Oh, you mean you had a bad dream?
No, it was real, just like on TV.
Okay, listen, sweetie. What's your name?
Nancy.
Well, Nancy, I'm Paula. Remember? And this is Sissy. And we're going to be right out there all night so nothing can hurt you.
It's a nice moment in the movie, and it needed some more sincerity like this over the humor, in my opinion. Also, in my headcanon for the movie, this was a Nightmare on Elm Street reference, given the name of the little girl being Nancy, and the fact that she's having a nightmare about a monster. A Freddy Krueger nod is definitely possible. Also, side note, I have a soft spot for this moment in particular since my mom's name is Nancy, and we love watching horror films together. Now, let me get into some negatives and my issues with the movie. Number one is, I would have preferred if they toned down the comedic bits just a little. I'm not against comedy in my horror films, but I would have liked it better if it was black comedy instead of the self-aware thing that they were going for. Like, for instance, look at the 1996 horror movie classic Scream. That movie is the king when it comes to meta or self-aware humor, and with balancing it, comedic dialogue from the characters. But the movie itself is still serious and at its heart a horror film, where this one felt more on bordering horror comedy, and that just didn't quite gel with me, and they didn't quite pull it off as well as they intended. Another issue I have is that it completely ignores Part 5 by not acknowledging at all the events of it. While it doesn't quite contradict Part 5 per se, it just may as well not exist when it comes to the events of Part 6. Now, I said my piece on how Friday 5 was kind of shit on excessively, in my opinion, while when it comes to this one, Part 6, I feel like it doesn't get enough criticism, and it gets a little bit too much love, in my opinion. This is not to say I hate the film. I still think it's good overall, but it could have been better off if they made the tone somewhat darker and tweaked some of the self-aware humor a bit to be less on the nose. Another big issue story-wise is the whole Crystal Lake name change they did to Camp Forest Green, which Sheriff Gareth mentions in the scene with Tommy when he locks his ass off, that the change was because they wanted people to forget all those horrible murders that occurred over the years because of Jason and his mother, and they pretty much wanted to pretend it never happened and wash their hands of it. Now, this is something I actually love, and my problem is the movie could have did so much more with it. For example, if they did have the budget to do it, hypothetically, make this film even bigger in scope by, instead of Jason just making a beeline to the camp killing randos, have the townspeople get more directly involved, and let's see their thoughts about the whole history of the camp and how it impacts them as a community. Kind of like what the fuck was that name of the movie? The Town That Dreaded Sundown, like that film. Or fuck, even Halloween 4 had a tiny bit more with this, with Michael Myers and his murders and how it affected the townsfolk. You know, with the whole angry redneck mob gunning down Michael throughout that movie. Or fuck, even better example was Halloween Kills, with the whole town going absolutely fucking nuts with panic and anger, and then them hunting Michael down. Now, I know people shit on the writing for that movie in particular, which admittingly isn't exactly unwarranted. However, the angry mob mentality of the townsfolk was fantastic because it made the film much wider in scope and added an extra layer of reality to it. Now, I know the execution wasn't the greatest of things, but I still loved it because it made me feel I was watching an old Universal or Hammer Frankenstein movie with the whole pitchfork and torches mob, which I'm going to touch on a bit on my positives later. But first, let me get into my final issue of the film that's connected with the story, and it bugs the living shit out of me. And it's the fact that this stupid motherfucker Tommy brings Jason back to life in the first place. That son of a bitch was dead in his grave, and because Tommy dug him up and the corpse got struck by lightning, and, well, we all know where this goes, Tommy is pretty much responsible for all the deaths in this movie and the next two sequels. Seriously, what the fuck, Tommy? Now, I know you're not exactly in the right mindset, but you didn't question digging up his grave at all? You stupid son of a bitch. No wonder why your big sister Trish doesn't bother talking to you anymore, because the past two movies don't even fucking acknowledge her, aside from a photo in part 5 and a sound bit of her in part 6. And that's another thing. Where the fuck is Trish? The fact that these movies don't even acknowledge her more directly is insulting. Now, I know Tommy and his trauma plus his battle with Jason were the focus, but goddamn, you're not even gonna mention your big sister once? What the fuck? Granted, I know this was more on the writers than the actual character, but geez. I mean, hell, thank God the Friday the 13th video game made by Gun Studios that came out a couple years back somewhat acknowledged this in the interview audio tapes of Tommy in the game, where it's mentioned that a rift began in their relationship because of Tommy's obsession with Jason in his mental state. Bottom line, they need to bring Trish back one more time, or at least give a scene of Tommy talking about her and what their current relationship is. Now, onto some positives on the film. I want to be clear that I do like this movie, that I want to reiterate again. I just wish it did some things different and had some tweaks. The first big positive is the gothic atmosphere of the film, which is fantastic, and it fits very well with the Friday the 13th series, which kudos to the director Tom McLaughlin for showing his often said love of the old Universal monster movies by going for that vibe. The weather in the film plays a great role in this, with the spooky, almost autumn-like wind toward the last third of the movie. All it needed was a big thunderstorm like the previous films, it would be perfect. The score is another big positive because it fucks pretty hard, which, when you have Alice Cooper playing Teenage Frankenstein and the man behind the mask in the ending credits, you can't lose. Another big positive I have is that the camp is finally open with actual kids being present, which adds another sense of scope to the film, and hasn't been done before with the exception of the opening scene in the very first Friday the 13th movie, when Mrs. Voorhees kills Barry and Claudette in the 1958 opener. Now, I know some people don't like kids in horror films, and admittingly, I sometimes have issues with it because, not to be an asshole, their acting more often than not is kind of shitty, but I can't be too harsh on them because they're kids, for God's sakes. I mean, they all can't be Danielle Harris in Halloween 4 or 5, or Natalie Wood from Miracle on 34th Street, which in my humble opinion are some of the best child acting I've seen in movies. But anyway, those are my major gripes and positives of the movie. Alright, overall, as I said multiple times, I don't hate this movie, despite me kind of shitting on it for the past 10 minutes. I mean, I like it, but every time I watch it, the missed opportunities and the comedy just make me shake my head and say, this would have been better, or at least more in line with the tone this movie should have gone for. It could have been significantly better, maybe even in the top 3 best films in the Paramount Studio era of the series, but they just missed the mark. My final ranking is going to be 3 out of 5 hockey masks, since the gothic horror vibe carried it for me personally. It's just a shame they didn't emphasize it even more so with a darker tone for the film. Well, guys, that's my mini flash review of Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. Up next, Part 7, The New Blood. Jesus Christ, I'm going to need a drink for that one.